10 o'clock, time to call the meeting to order. Today's meeting, special meeting, will be two items: programming of 1916 City Hall and public safety facilities, and item B, we had an August 21st, 2019 site visit at the water treatment plant as part of our work session for that day. There is also a KDOT consultant meeting on that day in Chanute also. And being that the presentator for the City Hall Public Safety Facilities is not here at the present time, let's move and discuss the August 21st.
Actually, that meeting's here. The 21st meeting, the consult meeting, there's a pre-meeting in Chanute.
Oh, okay. I was thinking the whole meeting was in
this room
Chanute.
or here?
No, like
in
Civic
Independence?
Center.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's at the same, well, there he is. It's at the same time as we scheduled the site visit. And I do have staff that will attend the consult meeting, but if any of you wanted to participate, then I was going to ask if you wanted to reschedule the site visit so that you could attend. If a majority attends, we'll need to do a special meeting notice.
Okay.
Thanks.
The KDOT consult meeting, that is also at 10 o'clock?
It's at 9.
At 9 o'clock. Okay, and our water treatment plant visit was also scheduled for 9 o'clock.
Exact same date and time.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Gentlemen, what's your pleasure on this?
I think the KDOT consult meeting will be more beneficial since it's once and the walkthrough can be done anytime. It's not that critical, it's just an update.
Yep.
I think KDOT's really been good to Independence with a lot of grants, and I think it could help us understand the programs more as commissioners and see the direction.
Is this
for
something they
future
do
budget.
regularly? I don't think I've ever been to
Yeah,
one.
they did one, what? So it's been a while, hasn't it?
At least 4 years ago. I think that one was in Chanute,
So it's not an annual thing or whatever.
right?
Well, probably makes sense to attend then.
Yeah, it's the first, I talked to Jim Wright this morning, and the first hour will be on new projects that are not already on their list. So
Okay.
that'll be the opportunity to bring those projects forward. There was a meeting with the county in the morning, with the other cities in the county and the county to kind of get together on to kind of brainstorm possible projects. And if any of you want to participate in that as well, like I said, if you have a majority, we have to do a special meeting notice. But we have staff that's going to attend that tomorrow.
So we would need to reschedule our water treatment plant tour.
Yeah, I just have
based
to
on-
get with Sarah
Yeah,
and
find out what days work for her and for
Yeah.
us. And
I
try
need to, yeah, because I don't know what her schedule is and she's probably all over the place. So
Right.
we can reschedule that, and then you guys can attend the consult. We'll just change the special meeting notice to the consult meeting. You will need to call the meeting to order and that kind of thing at the beginning, just
Only if we're going to
official.
talk, right?
yeah, if you want to participate, but I would think you would want to participate.
Okay.
So you want to do that?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. Get with Sarah and see what her time schedule looks like as far as rescheduling and doing come down and doing a walkthrough with the water plant facilities for us. And then when those dates are made available that she could be in attendance, then let us know and we'll decide on a date that we want to reschedule that too.
Okay, and then are you planning on, staff will be at the meeting with the county tomorrow, so none of you are planning on attending that, correct?
Not tomorrow.
Okay,
I'm not
that's
available.
fine. I just wanted to
I can't
make
either.
sure, because we would need to do a meeting notice if you were going to.
Sure. No.
So staff will cover that. I'll let you know what was discussed,
Okay.
and then we'll go on for there. And then there's another meeting in Chanute, and I had sent a copy of that. It was attached to the email on the 169 Coalition. And if some of you want to attend that, or maybe one of you, just let me know. And if we have a majority, then we'll address that as well, okay?
Okay.
Will that work?
Yeah.
That'll work.
Do we need a motion or?
I'll make a motion that we get with Sarah, is it Sarah Unruh?
Yes.
And find a date that we're all agreeable to reschedule the city water plant tour.
And to set a special meeting for the 9 a.m. at 21st
KDOT
for the consult
consult.
meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right.
All right. Moving on to
The main
item
attraction.
1. Yeah, the main attraction. Andy, Ian,
It's working. I tested it.
how are both of you today?
We're wonderful. How are you, Mayor?
Great.
We were worried about you getting caught in traffic or
I
something.
know. I'm sorry, with a little bit of construction on 59, we have to be routed all over the place.
Sure.
Well, good morning. Again, this is your meeting, so please stop me along the way if you have questions. What we're going to do is review what we have done over the last few weeks with staff, and then if you have any questions for Ian on the 1916 City Hall building, we can be able to address those also. So as we kind of step back and look to where we began about, well, almost 2 years ago, these were really the 10 items that we began to look at with our team and then with the steering committee to begin to address. And over the last few weeks, we've really begun to look again at these items that are bolded in red that we'll walk through in more detail. And as if you have questions, feel free to please stop me. So again, as we started, we looked at the condition of the existing City Hall, the 1916 City Hall, both on its conditions from a physical standpoint and then also its historic standpoint, and specifically the ability to recognize historic tax credits as part of any project going forward. And so we use that as a guide as we begin to look at what can we do from a renovation or a renovation and addition to this facility as we look at the different scopes of work. And as you know, there's an existing scope going on right now where there's been some abatement work, also some remediation, and then it'll move into the exterior preservation of that building. We also began to look at how much space or how much square footage is required for each of the different departments to accommodate the program that we began to look at. So we walked through each of the department heads again, talked specifically about staff changes, how they began to work, who wanted to be next to each other, how could we have some efficiencies. So we walked through the City Hall departments, we walked through the police department, and then ultimately the fire department to come up with a list of program spaces for each of those different scope items. And I'm going to walk you through some of those specifics and then some things that have changed since the last time we presented this information. So as we began to look at the specific city departments, there has been changes in how staffing and operational needs have occurred within the administration. There's been some title and some staffing changes along the way. There's also been some operational changes of staffing for the finance and the clerk and the city clerk from the records area. There's additional staffing associated with the housing authority, and we reduced the court clerks some of their shared space so we could be able to locate them adjacent to finance so they could begin to share back of house stuff, copy, work area, meeting spaces from an efficiency of that operation. So what Ian handed out is a more detailed list of all those spaces, so if you have specific questions, we could begin to look at all those spaces in there. And then also we took the training room that we originally programmed within the city departments and would use the commission chamber or other city spaces as training as opposed to building another large space within that facility. As we began to look at the police department and speaking with the chief, evidence storage has increased to put a demand on the department, and so we increased some of the program areas for that. We also added a found property as they continue to bring items to the department. They're not sure if they're involved in a crime or not, but they need to be able to store those items until they can begin to either release those or to determine what the next step is. We also added a space for a child in need of care. So this is a youth that comes to the facility. They may have been removed from their home. They may be a truant, and they need to have a spot where they're technically not in custody, but we need to have a spot for them to be able to have a safe place. Staff needs to be able to have a space there to be able to respond to those needs. So this typically includes a small little sleeping area, restroom, and then also workspace for staff. We modified the dispatch space to remove the county dispatch program items, and we added a server room, recognizing the server space and data space wanted to be adjacent to the dispatch area. We also discussed with them of designing this space to ICC 500 standards, which are storm shelter standards to protect that specific space during any type of a weather event. We also added a space for a canine kennel, and then we included an emergency operations center in conjunction with the fire department. We actually took the training space that we had programmed within the fire department, and we're now considering that an emergency operations center, and I'll show you here on the next slide. And we also increased the office area as the KBI have increased staff within the facility and within your area. We looked at the fire department. We included an EMS report room to this area. As I mentioned, we changed the training room into the Emergency Operations Center. We also designated that that space would be designed as an ICC 500 storm shelter also. And then because some changes with enlarged apparatus, enlarged fire trucks, and additional apparatus, we included a 5th apparatus bay to be programmed. So if you consider your existing temporary apparatus bay, there's 4 different bays associated with that, the number of equipment, and the moving forward, there was a desired 5th bay to be included within the program. So as we begin to look at where things have gone up and down, the bottom line was that general public spaces, we have dispersed those amongst the 3 others, because as we begin to originally look at things that included that training room, other staff support spaces, so we've now actually included those into the other departments. The city departments went from about 15,000 down to about 13,800. Police department, you see, went up to 16,000, and the fire EMS went up to about 22. Both of those, police side is primarily the evidence storage and the storage space associated with that. Fire EMS is associated with a little bit more support space for the Emergency Operations Center, and then also that 5th apparatus wing. So what can we now do to be able to incorporate this into specific programs? So the way we looked at it was we used the program requirements that were developed by the stakeholders, and then we developed concepts to accommodate that entire program. Now obviously it's your purview to say, let's not include all the program spaces, let's make some changes associated with that, but prior to making those decisions ourselves, we've looked at the holistic department and how could that begin to fit within each of the individual buildings. So we looked at 3 different options moving forward. So option 1 has A and B. What it takes is the city departments, and it locates all of those city departments in the 1916 City Hall building. Option 1A takes and locates a new public safety building, so it'd be fire and police, on the northeast corner across the street from the 1916 City Hall, the corner of 6th and Myrtle, in that parking lot. 1B still locates the city departments within the 1916 City Hall, but it locates the public safety building adjacent to the existing apparatus bay behind your temporary City Hall. Option 2 looks at a renovation of the 1916 City Hall, and in addition to that, to accommodate the city departments and the police department. And then option 2 locates the fire department addition to the existing apparatus bay. So we look at those in more detail. So this is the 1916 City Hall. These are the 3 floors, from basement being on the left of the screen, to the first floor in the middle, to the second floor being on the right. It locates the different program spaces. Primarily it has on the main level, the first level as you come in, it has the city clerk and records and the court clerk, locating again those adjacent to each other, and so they can be able to share those spaces. And then within the former apparatus bay locates the city commission chamber. On the upper level, it has city administration, along with some of the support spaces. And in the lower level has public works, I can't read from here, and housing authority from within that area. As you see, the additional apparatus bay that is to the east could be used for additional storage or additional program space for the city moving forward. So when we look at the new public safety building, again, this looks at the 5 apparatus bays, which is in the light pink. Primarily the first floor is the support spaces for the fire department, but it also locates, Siri is talking to me, sorry. She wants me to answer her questions. And it also locates the dispatch, which is the front door for the police station on that lower level. One of the big discussions we had with both fire and police would be the adjacency requirements of the EOC adjacent to dispatch. We don't need them touching, but if there is an event within your city, they want to have that relationship between where the calls are coming in and dispatch to where you're being able to respond and then communicate that back out from your different departments in the Emergency Operations Center. So one of those red squares on that space on the right-hand side is the Emergency Operations Center, and in the purple space above that is the dispatch. And in the second floor of the public safety building would be the majority of the police functions. If we look at 1B, the layout of the 1916 City Hall is identical to what you've seen before. But then we begin to look at an addition to the temporary apparatus bay. We add a 5th apparatus bay to that building. And again, we locate the fire department on the first floor, along with dispatch for the police department. And then the upper level is the rest of the police program space. Then as we look at option 2, is we begin to look at how we could do an addition to the 1916 City Hall building and still be able to maintain the historic integrities of the 2 front facades, which are primarily the west facade and the north facade, to be able to maximize your ability for historic tax credits. It's our recommendation an addition would want to go to the south of that building, to where that existing parking lot is. So that is what that box is on the lower portion of that, is an addition to the facility to accommodate all the functions for the police department. So it would put the functions for the city departments in there also, but then in the light blue is all of the police functions associated with the department.
And that's space we already own?
It is the parking lot that you own adjacent to City
Right.
Hall.
It's not,
Next to the alley.
Yes.
it's not taking out that little bank next to us, south of us.
No, sir. Not at this time. And then it would locate the fire department's program space on the land adjacent to the temporary apparatus bay, again, enlarging that apparatus bay, and then locating the program space. So as we look at these, I kind of want to walk through what we see as some high-level kind of pros and cons associated with each of the different spaces. So if we look at 1A, it provides all the program departments in the existing building, along with potential future expansion opportunities. It locates the court clerk adjacent to finance and the municipal court, enhancing those functions. And let me back up for a second as I talk about that, because as I didn't mention on this, this pulls the city commission chambers out of the 1916 City Hall building. So you would continue to use this space or another space within city for the city commission chambers. It locates the public safety building adjacent to the city departments. There has been some discussion about how that adjacency would help some staff efficiencies to be able to easily run back and forth between the different buildings. It provides a temporary apparatus bay to be relocated or sold for another use. It allows the maximum opportunities for the temporary City Hall building for future development. It utilizes that existing parking lot, which would displace some parking opportunities, which we need to discuss how much parking needs to be on site, and then what are some other opportunities. If we look at 1B, it again provides all the program spaces within the 1916 City Hall, along with additional opportunities. It continues to locate the court clerk adjacent to the courtroom. It utilizes your temporary apparatus bay for a permanent apparatus bay. It does require some addition to accommodate future and current vehicle needs. The public safety department is remote from the city departments, creating some potential staff inefficiencies. It does require separating the lots from your temporary City Hall building to the new public safety building. So we would do a lot split at that point. So we could have 2 lots, so you could potentially offload the northern portion of that lot for sale or another use. It would also require us to separate the utilities. Currently, that apparatus bay is being backfed through the temporary city hall. So we would need to bring new utility lines in, specifically power for that. And so there are some costs associated with that improvement. It does limit some of the proportion of land for future development. And it does not utilize the existing parking lot adjacent to the 1916 City Hall. There again, leaving that for parking opportunities within downtown. And then lastly, option 2 locates the police department in an addition to the 1916 City Hall. It does require an addition to the historic building. That addition would be a little bit more costly than building new someplace else, as we're tying on to that existing building, and will actually match the integrity of that existing building also. It does displace the housing authority from the program of that space. It remotes municipal court from the court clerk, which does enhance some staff inefficiencies. It separates the police from the fire department, duplicating some program space. As we're able to co-locate those, we're able to keep single server rooms, single staff support spaces within there. It utilizes the temporary apparatus bay for the permanent apparatus bay. And again, requires some sort of an addition. Again, requires a lot separation, as we are having the fire department on that lot also. It does limit a portion of that land for development adjacent to the temporary city hall. And it does not utilize that parking lot again, so parking opportunities for downtown. Any questions on those threes before I jump into the next piece? So let's talk about costs. So again, as we began to look at the cost, we're looking at construction costs. So both for the renovation of the 1916, plus whatever solution we have for the public safety building, whether that is new construction or renovation. Addition, we looked at the soft costs. So these are the other things besides the construction costs that need to be factored into the total project. We have begun to look at these numbers as 2020 numbers. So when we presented these to you before, we were looking at 2018. There has been some significant changes in cost. I've not tried to escalate these too much, recognizing that I'm trying to still keep this within an overall budget that you're beginning to look at. So what Ian again passed out, and it'll be easier for you to look at this as opposed to the screen. So we have the renovation to the 1960 City Hall. What we've been able to do is back out some of the costs that you've already spent. So as we began to look at, you've done the exterior improvements. The prior line item for that was about a $1.2 million number. The bids came in about 1.1. So what I'm hoping that illustrates is we're conservative, but we're close in what we think these numbers are going to be. I don't want to be the low number at the end of the day, but I also don't want to be so far off that we're using scare taxes of what these are going to cost. So we have demolition costs. The scope is going to be a little bit reduced, so that number's gone down from what the prior number was. Again, the square foot cost for renovation within the 3 floors. We have not programmed space within the attic because there is not an accessible means to that space, nor 2 ways out of that space. So it primarily would be used for storage. The site improvements, as I said, has been zeroed out because that has been a current scope of work. We've also modified some of the site work and the utility based upon what we now know could go in that building, meaning if the police department is not at the city hall, we don't need to have as large of a generator per se to be able to run that entire facility. So we've been able to modify some of those costs. Then we've also looked at the new construction cost for the public safety building. Primarily the changes here have been the square footage that we've indicated. We have been able to reduce some of the line item costs from the site, and again, the utilities, now that we have more specific ideas of what goes in there. And as we know where the soft costs are, again, some of those things have already been accomplished with your existing work, hazardous material abatement and so forth, reducing the scope of where the footprint is, changes the amount of geotech work we have to do, or the amount of construction testing that we have to do. So that brings you to about a $16.7 million project, again, for 2020. Includes both a 5% contingency on the design side and a 5% contingency on the construction owner side. As we look at 1B, so again, 1B is the same city departments occurring in the 1916 building, and then we are locating the public safety building adjacent to your existing apparatus bay. So the costs are the same for the 1916. We now have the apparatus bay. We've applied about a $10 a square foot to the increased size of that. So that would accommodate adding that 5th bay, plus some minor renovations within that space. And then we have the new construction, a 1st floor and a 2nd floor for the public safety building. I have in here, and I didn't mention this on the prior one, a premium to harden the space to go to the storm shelter for that program space. So that would basically be designing a room that can support 250 mile per hour winds. And so it's the structure around that, the roof structure, the floor, and the doors that are associated with that. So there is a premium of construction, and so we've applied that on top of that. So at least you can see what that line item is, and if we need to have a discussion of whether that's included or not, we can. We have a little bit of a higher cost on utilities from this side, just recognizing we're going to have to bring new service to the building. And again, we've just the soft cost, which brings us to about a $15.27 million project. And then lastly, this is a renovation in addition to the 1916 City Hall. So again, the police department is located at the City Hall building. Again, the cost up top are the renovation of that work. So again, that's the same as the prior two. And then we have the police addition. So the cost per square foot for this addition, as opposed to building it either at across the street or at the temporary apparatus bay, we did increase that, recognizing we're going to have to match the character of your existing building, which does increase some of those costs from the exterior of the building. Again, site costs have been modified. Actually, we reduced some of the site costs because the building will go onto the parking lot, which would eliminate a lot of the work that would happen there. And then we have the addition to the fire department that's at the temporary apparatus bay. And again, the soft costs that go along with that. That brings us to a mid-$13 million number. Again, these costs are based upon escalating for 2020 project costs. So with that, I'll stop and let your head stop spinning, and you can answer and ask any questions.
Space went the wrong way.
And that's,
You know,
again, it's based upon what we've heard from the departments of what's changed over the last 2 years. Again, it's your purview, Commissioner, if you want to indicate additional spaces being reduced. We've just looked at it for what the departments have talked about from where they are staffing, because some staffing has changed. But we look for your direction.
We need to go through the program, and I'd like to see the slides that we can have a chance to look at them. It's hard to absorb it all right now in a meeting and give direction, but definitely we're going the wrong direction. Each time we look at it, everything gets bigger, but yet our means of financing keeps getting smaller. And I think that's something we're going to have to really take into consideration of what long-term is going to be with our finances for the city, and the 13 to 16 million is too high without looking in detail to know where it can change. I think some of the things I don't see staff getting bigger, but as things happen, it should be getting smaller. Technology increases. I think we need to look at shared. We talked earlier one meeting about combining countywide dispatch. So, I think before we make a commitment, we really need to look at the feasibility to do that with where the county was in our dispatch area. I think some of the logistics can be worked out, and, we're just going to have to trim it back. But where, without looking in detail at the plans and studying the program and your costs, right now, I don't know where. We just need to look. I think it's a detailed presentation that gives us that information to look and we're early enough in the design that we can
Absolutely.
have that opportunity. But
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I followed this along from the plan to renovate the 1916 City Hall from 2014. And we've been at this now, it's the year 2019 going into 2020. And the costs have continually risen astronomically. The amount of square footage has increased continually. And I would like to see some more information other than the figures that are on here that you presented today. Just on the face of it, just looking at total project cost, they all seem excessive to me. I think we need to go back and look at how all this is put together. I do know not the previous city manager, but the one prior to that. I know that there were some personnel departments brought into the old city hall, the 1916 city hall, as far as EMS personnel and others that to prove a point that the building was overcrowded and they needed more room. And that I got from sitting through many of the meetings that went on about this. So I think we need to go back and look at this and determine and go the other direction. That's my own personal opinion. I think it's, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to make any other further comments.
and maybe it's time we look at reorganizing departments to make more efficient use of people. We're maybe there's areas that we haven't looked at that can adjust to cut staffing and some alternates. At the additional bay for equipment. I guess I need to look at the notes to understand that more on where we're going. But I think long term we need to look at other possibilities of space and just at increase. So to look at what changed, I think some of your diagrams in here, you did some space diagrams, didn't you?
Correct.
Just showing area for space. That'll help tie in the handout with what you got. So, if we could have a print of your presentation to go through again and start looking, I think, the information is here. Now we need to look and see what we're talking about with the additional, where we're trying to accomplish things that we can make the best out of the space we have and also future operation of the city.
Andy, I'm often accused of being delusional, but I think the city's going to grow over the next 20 years. Does this give us any room for growth, or is this, assuming we're going to shrink as most people believe we will?
There's not a significant amount of growth built into those programs.
Okay.
There are some flex spaces because some departments don't have a permanent office at City Hall, and so are some flex areas for them to be able to come in and do reports and some work. There's also some space, specifically like administration, where when your auditor comes in, there's some workspace, but it's, it's probably one office within that entire department, really. Within the police department, there is some potential growth, and that's primarily in patrol, which would be locker room space.
I see.
But we have not built a significant amount of staff, if any, staff growth within
Okay.
this program.
Another question that came up earlier, if we were going to spend this kind of money, which my partners up here indicate they're not interested in spending that, but if we were, I've been told we really want to be able to pull our fire equipment in where it's straight drive-through. That's not allowed on that lot. That's not allowed on either of the two options.
So typically, a drive-through bay works more where apparatus can go out both ways.
Yeah,
And so that way, because if you think about your existing building, if you have a truck that's in the back and that's the one you need to get out,
right.
you've got to move the truck or trucks in front of it. This allows you to stage going out both ways. So the larger apparatus going out towards the street, the smaller being your command vehicles or your brush trucks, EMS, can go out the backside, which is going to be the tighter turning radiuses and so forth.
But they still have to back the vehicles in.
They do, and it seems like even when we try to do an approach of a drive-through, they end up backing most of those vehicles in because there's not
Really?
usually an open lane
Gotcha.
for them.
Okay.
I think there is the potential on the southern the southern portion of that site to be able to have a drive-through for that for your larger apparatus, but typically we see them staging in both directions.
The lot north of the 1916 City Hall, we're really tight on parking downtown. I kind of hate to give that up, and it doesn't seem like, from something Commissioner Kaflish said earlier, that's not an ideal spot for public safety building anyway. Do you concur that that's not the ideal spot? I mean, if we were really serious about investing this kind of money, should we be looking at a different location than that?
Well, I mean, it's city-owned land, so I guess if I'm trying to maximize resources, we'd want to look at that opportunities first.
Sure.
I don't know if there's other potential city-owned land that would allow for more flexibility.
Right.
Ideally, you would like to minimize the amount of emergency vehicle traffic you would put on a major street like that.
Right.
And so that's probably the biggest issue why that wouldn't probably be your primary location initially.
Yeah, but that makes me think right where they're sitting is not a bad spot compared to going back downtown.
And that's a decision that ultimately the commission has to decide. And I can provide you pros and cons to each of the sites
Sure.
of what's available there.
Fair enough.
From a previous conversation, when we looked at this project, you did indicate as far as growth of staff that you didn't see the potential for a lot of growth, that you had programmed in maybe an increase of one position. So do you still stand by that?
Yes, and this is
statement?
based upon the discussions that we had with each of the departments, is there was not an increase of staff requested nor programmed within the space. Again, it was more the flex space, and so other department heads or other city staff could be able to come to City Hall to be able to do any of the work that they need to be able to do and have a desk or a space for that.
Okay.
And I know you've done this many times, Andy. I have not. But so, again, my gut is I'd like to have all the public safety people in one location. And but I really don't know how important that is. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there is some efficiency between both the programming of spaces and then also the location of that dispatch adjacent to the
Yeah,
emergency operations.
Exactly.
So I think it is ideal that those two departments are located, recognizing there are many cities that the two departments don't get along, and it's better to actually separate them.
Ours love each other.
Yes, I don't see that here. So I think there are some efficiencies between that. There's some challenges associated with that also, but there are some efficiencies. Like you said, I've done this a lot. I don't think I've ever had a city where they said just build everything we want. I mean, ultimately, there have to be hard decisions that are made
Sure.
of here's the resources we have, how can we best maximize, and what does that mean? And whether that's a reduction of program or a change of the overall quality, which ultimately you need to make the decision of, we're making a decision today that may have some ramifications as you move forward. So with mechanical systems, it's going to cost less today, but it may cost over 25 years to operate this facility. It'll be more expensive. As we began to look at these are 75-plus year buildings. We're not trying to provide you something that's going to be a maintenance hog for the next years going forward. And as you think about fire and police, they're 24/7, 365, heavily used buildings. So at the same time, we try to accommodate those as we look at the cost. I'm happy to provide kind of where we've seen some of the cost in other municipalities around the state and surrounding areas. As you mentioned, the costs are not, unfortunately, going down. We've seen increases in material, and we've seen significant increases in labor. I mean, we're lucky to get 2, if not 3 bids. I'm happy right now sometimes on 1 bid because it's just so busy within the industry. So it's really been driving where the costs have been going.
I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with what the other commissioners said about these costs being kind of a take your breath away. Although I've been involved with several renovations downtown, and it's amazing how fast you can drop $1 million on an old building. So you've got a figure in here to renovate the 1916 building in option 1A of $3.8 million. That sounds perfectly reasonable to me. The other ones are the ones that kind of take my breath away, starting from scratch. So if we were to build a new public safety facility, option 1A, do you have any idea what that looks like at this point, or is this just a budget figure?
So for the $9.7 million, what does a public safety building look like?
Yeah, is it going to look like the City Hall building, or is it going to be a Butler building? I mean,
Well, you can take a prefabricated structure and still make it look
Yes.
compatible with your
Yep.
downtown environment. And I think that's what, as we had discussions with other stakeholders during the prior process, was to mirror the design fabric of what is in your downtown now. We wanted to make sure we didn't have a building that would stick out and not match what's the other fabric of
Okay.
downtown. So
All
you're
right.
thinking about a masonry exterior building.
Okay.
I mean, behind that, it is a steel frame or a steel stud.
right, okay.
You know, we just built a police station in Gardner, Kansas that just opened this last month, and it was mid 300s a square foot. I mean, and so we're averaging right now 250. So this is on, from a public safety standpoint, one of the lower ends. But if you think about the infrastructure that has to go in dispatch alone, I mean, you know how much you spent just moving dispatch to the temporary city hall and the
Right.
back feed of all that fiber and infrastructure and phones and everything. There's a significant a cost that go along with that. And so I'm just trying to be realistic. I'm not trying to show you something just to, take you back.
Maybe you could show us some numbers that make us feel better about this, though, just for the fun of it.
Well, again, I mean, it's your prerogative at the end of the day of what this scope needs to be. And so, if you said this is where we have to be dollar-wise, we're going to show you either what that means from a program and a size standpoint or what that means from a quality standpoint. And then you're just going to have to weigh the pros and cons associated with that to make those decisions.
Well, I think it's always a balancing act. You know, whenever we do something, we always have our desires, and we always go for as much as we can get. But then when we look at the dollar, we got to come to realization that I got to pay for it, and that's where we have to start adjusting. And the two places are space and type of construction, and there's a trade-off on both, but we've got to be realistic that we have to have a facility that operates, but we got to be able to afford it also. And sometimes, if you're looking at the increased cost to go for a masonry exterior, and you say the space is what I need, well, then the solution is to locate it then where the exterior facade isn't as critical. So, by relocating to another site, then you can save money and you're still getting the area. But there's always got to be some trade-offs of what I think I need and what I can actually work in. And, there's other areas of future growth, departments being in lease space, or, there's other options. And, well, even, and I'm not for sure, I have to look to see what you're meaning about coming into the building to write a report, that if you have department heads located remotely where their work staff is, that report can electronically be transferred. They don't need to go to City Hall to actually fill out that report. So, you know, by locating space in some of the outlying departments for supervisory personnel, you're not going to need the space in City Hall for them to come in and actually do their work. It'll all be done electronically. So that's where kind of getting an understanding of what you've programmed for these areas, it'll start coming together. But, you know, it always seems technology keeps improving, that the need for actual operation in a building becomes less. So many businesses now, staff is working at home and submitting their reports and activity. I see that hand back there, yeah. Yeah. But, you know, I think where we're at this
We have
point.
our first volunteer.
Yeah, we need to try and look at where the marketplace will be for space, or the future footprint of a business.
And correct, and Commissioner, and to be trying to look at these as apples to apples as much as we can. I didn't modify the cost per square foot thinking about where location may be.
Yeah.
But there are definitely opportunities, depending on where things could go, that cost per square foot could be modified.
Yeah.
But I was trying to just look at it from at least from a same thing,
Yeah.
depending on where it goes.
Yeah, I think for where we're at, your presentation, your figures are good. So we can look back at the original study where you had the cost figures there and program space to compare where we are now, and then try and look what the needs will be 20 years from now.
And recognize in these costs, I mean, if you just look at the soft cost alone between the furniture, fixtures, and equipment and the owner's contingency, there's $1 million in each one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you may decide that we're going to go a different route on furniture, so let's be able to change that number. Or, you know, because it's new construction, we don't need as high of a contingency on some of these. So there's a lot of numbers that, as this gets more detailed, we'll really be able to refine that and hopefully bring those numbers down.
Because in your soft cost for furniture, that's 100% new. That's not reusing.
What we try to do is we usually have a percentage of what the construction is on average. That'll vary from community to community. And so we begin with that. If I know it's going to be all brand new, I'll probably bring that up. On this case, I'm looking at more of an average of that. So you're talking about $400,000 of furniture. That's pretty significant new furniture within those spaces. We also try to not budget the cheapest things. So if you think about, if you go into a law enforcement environment, there's a heavy use on those items, and so you don't have to buy them every 3 to 5 years. You have something that's going to be lasting for a long term.
Yeah. Stainless steel bolted to the floor.
Well, that's in the jail side.
Oh, okay.
Andy, I appreciate you've been very careful not to tell us if you have a favorite amongst these three. But if you were sitting in my chair, what would your favorite be amongst these
I'm
three?
not going to answer that question.
Oh, come on. Come on.
It's not my decision, Commissioner. I mean,
I know. That's why I said if you were up here, if you were the commissioner.
It's an extremely difficult decision because I recognize there's a lot of factors as you look at this. It's the political. You're laughing because I got the politician stance.
I've been in your shoes,
yes.
too.
I believe that putting the city departments back in the 1916 City Hall building makes the most sense for your city going forward. I think it historically has been the right spot for it. I think economically that's where you want your city staff to be. I think from a vision and of what you're trying to create within downtown, I think that makes sense. I think you have a treasure that you've already begun to renovate, and I think that seems to be a smart project moving forward for the city. Now the hard answer is, where does the public safety building want to go?
Right.
I'm not sure there's really a right answer or a wrong answer on that. It's going to be a variety of things. You have an asset at the temporary city hall with that building. Is it best located there, or is it best located someplace else? Yeah. What is the value to be able to sell that entire land without having to carve a portion of that off? And so does that mean you need to investigate in a real estate broker now to be able to figure out what those opportunities are? I mean, I know what you would love for that property to be, and does that seem to be realistic? And then is there other land opportunities that make sense for that building that's economic? Because that's what you begin to look at. We did not look at that initially in the study because we were trying to focus on really the city-developed land going forward. As you think about land, the police department is not as critical as the fire department, and so the fire chief's going to want to have a lot of input in where that spot wants to be, of how they want to respond within your city. And then how does that begin to impact not only his operations, but then also your insurance ratings within the community. So I'm not sure there's really a good answer for that. I like the synergy of having the public safety near City Hall just because there is some synergy of the staff.
I do too.
The question is that site the right site from either developing it or from how downtown needs to occur, and primarily parking. Every downtown I go into, there's never enough parking. And it's really more of where's the parking, and it's never where it wants to be or needs to be or where I'm going today.
Yeah, it seems very tight to me to try to move public safety down there, especially attached to the current city hall.
You know, we
But
looked
right
at-
across the street, it seems tight also.
Yeah, we looked at going to a 3-story originally.
I remember.
We're concerned about that just from how do we begin to impact the historic building adjacent to it.
Right.
It's going to be more economical to take that entire site, but we're also then taking the entire parking lot.
Right.
I mean, the best thing I can do is to sit down with you and have a pros and cons and a checklist and say, ultimately, what are the ones that come to the forefront to see what that decision is. There's many times I've driven around a city with staff and said, who owns that land? Who owns that land? What can we get to try to figure out what's the right spot? And it's amazing sometimes what can come out of the woodwork.
When you look at the large apparatuses in fire department, one of the things about the parking lot, you're limited to only a entrance on 6th Street with a grade change. If you lower it, you're going to be below grade on the east. But then the traffic not only coming out to respond to a fire with the amount of traffic on 6th Street, but backing the apparatuses back into the bay is going to be an issue. Where on Myrtle Street, where it is now, you look at the type of street that is there, low traffic, a wide roadbed, so you're not competing with that traffic. You have plenty of room to come in and go out. So, you know, that type of street from West Myrtle to 6th Street, the comparison is obviously the advantage is in a low traffic, wide roadbed that you have the luxury to come and go without worrying about cross traffic. So locations are limited when you start looking at a flat site, easy direct access, low traffic. There are very few that have that benefit. So, you know, it makes it difficult to find, like you saw driving around the city, where can you find those features that are conducive for a large equipment, flat property that can have front and back entrance if you want, or, you know, at least recognizing that the apparatuses will still be backed in where you have the leisure not to obstruct traffic or deal with an unattentive driver or responding to a fire and trying to blend into traffic too. So there's a lot of considerations.
I think we need to get together and go over this, determine what adjustments we need to make on this. The bottom line is that whatever we come up with, it needs to meet the needs going forward, but it also has to be something that's palatable to the taxpayer, because they are the ones that are going to look at the project and determine how much money they're going to be willing to want to invest for these facilities here. We know we need facilities. The critical issue is what will be the final cost that we derive at, how it's going to be paid for, and will the public buy into it? Because if you don't have the public support for that, then these numbers really are meaningless. And as I look at these numbers now, I know costs are excessive, but I think we need to do some more additional work to find a way to look at the scope of everything that's proposed here and come up with something that I think would be more agreeable to the community at large, to the taxpayers, to the commissioners, and I think that's probably the direction we need to head. And I would like to see some, if you have some slides and other information available, if you could forward that to the city staff and we could share that information with us so we could kind of see what this is. I was thinking, with technology the way it is, our time is limited here to a couple of meetings a month. We have a monthly work session. We'll have some special sessions here, but all our work is handled from home. I mean, rarely do we ever go to City Hall other than to pick up mail. So everything we're getting, documents, everything that's coming to us is coming via the internet. So, we're used to working from that space, even where I was employed at before. I was over areas that, when they were designed, they weren't designed to accommodate additional people, and you just found a cubby hole where you could connect up to the internet and work. So the whole scope of how we operate and how we change via technology is constantly evolving. And I think maybe that's the direction we need to look at. I've been in several communities where the fire department and EMS is in one site. The police and the city administration or city hall offices are in the downtown area. Other cities to where they've had growth, they have satellite fire and EMS stations in different parts of the city. So I don't know whether that's so much critical that they all be together, as long as they're in somewhat proximity of each other, being as to how we communicate now. And what is the savings versus the inefficiencies that you might have to compensate versus the total cost of that facility that you're going to be paying on for a good number of years? Does that override that factor? So there's just a lot of things to look at, and I think we need to go back and revisit some of these areas and make some adjustments as we go along.
We can provide a PDF of the PowerPoint. Kelly has it. She probably can create it there. We can send you copies of electronically of what we've handed out here today. Is there anything in addition to that you were looking for? Just want to make sure that we capture that correctly for you.
I don't know, after we go through this more in detail, we might, maybe then we can bring that up at a meeting and share it with each other, and then Kelly can contact you and go through that. Because, I think, there's just a lot to absorb, and the text, you see the colors, but you can't see the keys, so you don't know what beautiful drawings, but they're meaningless if you can't read them. So you did a good job of making them pretty, but for us to see them that far away, and now to try and tie those with your program. So
Understand.
It'll really be beneficial to us to have these copies where we can look and do the comparison, and I think it give us time at a commission meeting just to share and visit among ourselves, and then get back with with Kelly and you, and, you know, maybe even another meeting to go over with you our questions again at a work session. So brainstorm, because, you know, the buck stops up here. We're going to be held accountable for the decision, and, you know, I think that's the way we need to recognize that we're setting the trend for the future, and we make a mistake, it's on us. So we need to understand to be able to communicate with you and make those decisions. But I think you've given us a lot of information, see directly what you've done, and you sidestepped Commissioner Hogsett's question very well.
Very effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. You can always tell a sidestep when the answer becomes longer.
So I should have just said no.
Well, you did in the end. Yeah. But
Also, staff will need to be a part of that process, because there may be reasons that, for this programming, that you may not be aware of based on they're most familiar with how their departments operate, and how that operates is, you know, going to be an important piece of this. So you may have questions for them on, okay, so why did you need this space? Explain to me, you know, what you're doing, what the service is that you're providing, and why you need that. And
Right.
so I think that is an important piece of this as well.
yeah, well, that's where all the communication has been staffed to Andy,
Right.
and now we're back trying to digest all of that. Now we need to come up to speed to first understand where we're at here, and then go back.
Right. It's all about
Just say-
communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is something that we need to continue to talk about, and not let this continually linger.
Yeah.
They always said that things move slow when you consider how government of any type works. And I can affirm that, yes, the only thing that moves slower than city government is molasses.
Well, every time we talk about it, we all sort of get the wind knocked out of us because the costs are so high.
Yeah,
But I
they
do
are.
think we need to keep pushing forward and not let it languish another
We need
2
to.
or 3 more years.
We need to. No, we can't continually afford to let this linger on. So
Yeah.
my suggestion would be we need to set up a work session. Give us a chance to go through these documents that we've gotten today, and maybe put that on the agenda for the September
The
third Wednesday
Third Wednesday in September.
in September. That'll give us a
That
little
would
over a
be
month.
September 18th, Andy.
Would that happen to fit into your schedule?
I need to confirm one thing, because I may be in another presentation that day, but let me
Okay.
confirm, and I can get with Kelly.
Okay. We could be adjustable on our date, at least that's my opinion. I mean, this is important enough, we need to be flexible to where we can arrange to meet with you. If that turns out to be the third
Of that
Wednesday.
week, that's the only one that I know may have a conflict.
Okay,
So if there was another week, another day that week that would work, that would be fine.
The following would be the 25th, which is the day before your 26th commission meeting. Would the 25th of September work?
I think that works for me.
Do you want to tentatively set that date? So that we have.
yeah, I would like to.
Yeah.
At
Yeah,
9
if that's
a.m.?
agreeable, not at 9 a.m. on the 25th,
Or do you need 10 for
or
travel?
10 for travel.
What works best?
Well, you saw how efficient we were.
10:15?
Yeah, 10:05.
10 will be fine.
Okay, 10 o'clock on the 25th. It's a
Okay.
Wednesday.
Okay. And then any additional questions that any of us come up between now and then? I think we all have your email. We can shoot you and ask for some clarification or some additional information as we see fit, as we go through these documents between now and the 25th of September. So we've got you on the books for Wednesday, the 25th, September, 10 a.m.
Sounds
Would
good.
it be helpful to send those to me so that I can send them to him, and then I can send the response back to all the commissioners so that you all have the same information?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay, so if you could send your questions to me, I'll send them to Andy, and I'll send his responses to everybody.
Okay,
Will
Sounds
that
great.
work?
okay.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you, Andy.
Andy, thank you very much.
And Ian.
And Ian, thank you.
Is Ian going to talk about the construction?
I can, if there's anything you want to ask about
Yeah.
on that.
It looks like it's going slow. I've only seen Hofer and Hofer's truck there today. That's probably because you're coming to town.
Yeah,
The abatement contractor happened quick, but there hasn't been any signs of anyone up there
yeah,
on a regular basis. Well, hardly any at all since the 29th.
right, yeah. Hofer and Hofer let me know that they were going to be getting started on the demolition work in the upper floors. The delay right now is that the earliest that the mold remediation in the basement could occur was the 9th of September, during that week. So they may be just waiting to do all the demo after the mold is taken care of, but that's something I can ask Hofer and Hofer what. If you haven't seen any kind of progress, I can ask them what's up with that. So
Yeah, because there's a lot of different elements, like the roof replacement, the tuck pointing.
Mhm.
I see there's tape on the windows. One citizen asked what that was for. They were wondering if to shoot or. I assume they just mark the windows as they're going through measuring, but
yeah, that
there's
would be my assumption.
hardly anything at all going on, and doesn't look like contractors mobilized. Their truck came in this morning, but it doesn't. We got a lot of construction days allowed, but there's not anything going on. So how are we justifying that completion schedule?
Right. Yeah. No, I can follow up with them. If you haven't seen any progress on the ground here, I can follow up with them and make sure that they're on target for what they were telling me they were going to be getting accomplished. So
Are they getting shop drawing submittals in, or?
I haven't received any yet. I know they were working on details for the window submittals for details on the windows. So they were going to go through and they were in the process. They did take one entirely apart to be able to see if any of the historic frame and the weight boxes were still in the frames behind them. And at that one that they did disassemble, it looked like the weight boxes had actually been removed. So there may be some additional blocking that we'll have to put in to get that frame back up to the size of the windows that we had in the window schedule. But beyond that, I haven't received anything shop drawings wise from them. So.
Has he given you a construction schedule?
He said he was going to be getting me that shortly. He said that it was looking like they would be on target for actually finishing up ahead of what their construction days were allowing. But we'll see once he gets me a finalized schedule what that is. So.
Okay. Because I think a lot of people are concerned we awarded the contract, but don't see the work going on.
Right. Yeah. And I think, like I said, part of the holdup is just that mold abatement in the basement and waiting to do the demo down there until that's taken care of. So.
A good reason
Yeah.
or excuse why.
Yeah.
And I do have, Ian provides us a progress report every week, and if you go on the website,
Yeah.
you go under government, and then the administration city manager page, and then I have the 1916 City Hall Phase 1 progress reports that I post on there. I'm doing the same on the utility department page for the water treatment plant project. So anytime I get one of these progress reports, I'm uploading them so you guys, or the public, or whoever, can track what's going on. And Ian's been really good on sending those to me, so. that's another way to keep track of the project.
I just notice when I drive by every day, if I don't see trucks, can't be much going on with no one there.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my question is, I understand they want to get the mold abatement in the basement cleared up, but could there not be some work on the exterior of the building that doesn't have the people going actually into the facility, that some of that work could be addressed while that abatement's cleared up? I'm in the same. We awarded the contract, and you know, you don't see a whole lot happening at the facility. And in the short time I've been sitting here, we seem to have these contracts go out, and the companies that bid on these contracts are good at the presentation and selling what they're going to do, and you award the contract, and then there seems to be a drag from that point on as them actually, having the pre-construction meeting, coming on site, actually starting to address the work and meeting it, in the specified dates that they determined that project was going to be completed. It seems they're good at getting the project, but the disconnect is them following through and being consistent and completing the project. And, in my year and a half here, that's kind of what it appears to me. Seems to be a little disconnect there. So I guess what I'm saying is, I guess we're going to hold your feet to the fire and hofer. Because we want to see results.
Yeah. No, that's understandable. And,
So-
with exterior work, I know they discussed with me that due to the delay in getting started on construction for waiting for the approval of the Part 2 submission for the tax credits, that there were some things that had to shift in their schedule to accommodate their subs with, for example, the roof work with the school schedule. During the summer, that's when the roofer was going to be busy with a lot of school projects. And so now that we're moving into when they're wrapping those up, I think we could see them getting started on the roof work. Same thing with the masonry. There was some things I think that shifted in their schedule. But
Oh, one more question. The mold level increased because of lack of air movement and humidity in the basement. Do we have anything planned, or is this going to be a problem going forward during construction as the building sits idle? Do we have anything scheduled like a fan to suck and pull air through the basement and exhaust out, or once we close it up again and the lack of air movement, and because the mold spores are everywhere, it's just providing them the opportunity to breed, which dark and no air movement. So how is that? I don't remember. And since it just came up since the project bid, is this something that we need to look at addressing going after this phase is done, that we can put some ventilation in?
yeah, I think that was something that we didn't have any kind of ventilation included in this in the construction documents, but that's definitely something we can look at once we get the windows buttoned up and a new roof on it, and we can look at and see just how much moisture there may still be coming into the building, and have all the sump pumps operational and the foundation drain system working the way it should. Then we can look and see if there's still enough moisture coming in the basement that we think if there's going to be an issue going forward or not, with it being potentially a while before work moves forward in there. So.
Okay, because with the two area ways on the north and the south, an exhaust fan could be placed in those openings and pulled air from the second floors down through the building, or even first floor down, to keep the basement ventilated.
Right.
Okay.
And then one other question, from what you had mentioned earlier, and make sure I got this right, you had said Hofer and Hofer, they're scheduled to be on site September the 9th?
The abatement for the mold
The
remediation.
abatement for the mold, okay.
Yeah.
And did they give a timeline as far as the abatement?
Yeah, they said that they would anticipate they'll have that done within that week.
Okay. And then at that point, then they will be on site to begin the interior demolition and
Yeah,
demolition and
correct.
doing that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be looking for, the 9th and then the week of the 16th. Okay. Gentlemen, any other questions?
No, I don't.
You're good? Ian, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Andy, thank you again. Well, gentlemen, we've got our work cut out for us. We all do. Staff and commissioners. With that really concludes all the business we were going to handle today at the meeting. So I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you for all attending today.